Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm your host, Kirk Witmer, and with me today is, again, another Coatesville native. Please welcome Ann Demaio. Ann, it's nice to have you with us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Ann, you told me you were born in the Coatesville Hospital.
Yes.
Can I ask you what year?
Yes, 1928.
Okay. And your maiden name was?
DiVincenzo.
DiVincenzo.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also, my real name is really Anna, but most people call me Ann.
Well, we're glad to have you here in any case, Ann.
Thank you.
Tell me about some of your early childhood memories of Coatesville. What was life like back then?
I have very good remembrances of Coatesville. My parents came from Italy and settled in Coatesville because my father had come here before my mother, and he worked for Luke and Steel. And we lived on 6th Avenue for about 17 or 18 years. And then we moved over to Chester and Walnut. They built a new home there. Mm-hmm. And I went to parochial school. I went to St. Cecilia's School till 8th grade. And then 8th grade, I went to Gordon. And then from Gordon, I went to Scott. And I had I have good feelings about growing up here. We went to the movies, and my parents really made sure that we did a lot of things. Mm-hmm. My mother had me learn to play the piano, and that has really, I've kept that up, and I play the organ at our church. So that was one of the things she did. And Coatesville was really, really lovely. It was really nice. The town was bustling. We'd go downtown on Friday nights and go into the stores, and we'd stop at Sandy's for ice cream or Cokes or whatever. So it was a good place to live when we were growing up.
Now, Ann, you mentioned attending Gordon School.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to clarify that a little bit for the folks who are watching. It's not the current Gordon School in 1999.
Right.
Tell us which school you're referring to.
Well, it was Gordon Junior High, and it was on the Lincoln Highway. Apparently, in fact, I know it had been the high school at one time. And then when they built Scott, Gordon became 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And it was a lovely place to go. It was quite a difference for me from going from parochial school to public school. But I got to meet a lot of nice people. The teachers were good. We had a good foundation there. And then we went on to Scott. I only went to the 9th grade there. And then I went on to Scott for 10th, 11th, and 12th.
And you were only 1 or 2 years old when the market crashed in 1929.
Right.
Do you have any memories of how the Depression impacted your family?
I don't remember, but I can tell you that my father, excuse me, my father would work 1 or 2 days a week. I remember him telling me that. And they felt fortunate at the time that they were only renting their home on 6th Avenue at the time. And the people who rented them the house was very good to them. They only paid $15 a month rent. But my father did the repairs and took care of other things. And I remember them talking about it. But I don't remember too much about it, to be honest with you. When I went to 1st grade and so on, things seemed to be going pretty well for our family. My dad worked at Lucan's, and he enjoyed his job, and my mother stayed home to raise me and my brother.
And being a high school graduate in 1946, that was just about the time that World War II ended.
Right.
I'm sure the war years must have had some impact on the teenagers in our community. Share your memories with us.
It did. I remember in 10th grade, we would have dances where you had to bring newspapers to get in, a stack of newspapers, because the country needed that. And we also had victory gardens. People would plant all kinds of vegetables and so on for their dinners and so on, because you couldn't always
get
buy
vegetables otherwise.
No, and I worked on the weekend at Simon's Shoe Store, and we all had everybody was issued stamps. You could buy 1 or 2 pairs of shoes within a certain time. And I remember when I was there, the day that the stamps would be gone, the last day that they were available, the shoe store was jammed with people and shoes and so on, really. But to get back to the high school situation, we really, was a good time for us. As I said, we got involved in, we used to go to the Y. Mr. Hoffman was secretary of the YMCA, and he developed this letter. It was called the Red Triangle. And he would send a newsletter to all the fellows who were in the service from Coatesville. And so the high school kids, we were recruited to fold the Red Triangle. And another thing, at Christmas time, he sent every soldier from Coatesville a fruitcake. And we helped with that. And then when we would be finished, Mr. Hoffman would take us over to the auditorium, which was connected to the Y.
Right.
The auditorium was the big movie house. So that was nice. And sometimes we would write a little note to the soldiers and tell them who we were and that we wished them luck and so on. And we would have victory dances at school. When we'd hear good news about how the war was going, we would have victory dances. And there again, you got in with a pile of newspapers. That was your entrance fee to the dance. And then I remember in 11th grade, the war was over with Germany. And it was announced, I'll never forget it, announced in our bookkeeping class at 11 o'clock in the morning. And by 12 o'clock, everyone had left school because there was a big celebration in town and so on.
This was VE Day?
VE Day. And then the following year, in 45, I think I have my dates straight, Japan surrendered. And that was a big doing in our town. Now, I think that was in August, if I'm not mistaken, when the VJ Day happened. And of course, everybody was just thrilled and about the whole war being over.
There was some dancing in the streets then,
Dancing in the streets. Right.
When you were working at Simon's Shoe Store, just out of curiosity, do you remember how much money you were making?
$12.50 a day.
A day. For a whole day.
I worked Saturdays, Friday night and Saturdays. And actually, I'm saying a day. No, it was $12.50 for the week.
For the week.
Whatever
yeah,
I put in.
For the Friday night and Saturday, a whole
right.
$12.50.
$12.50. And I thought that was good spending money.
And from high school, you went on to?
I went on to work. I was hired by Dr. Vanderslice to work for the Coatesville School District. It was in March of my senior year. I will never forget it. He called me down and he asked me if I'd like to work for the school district. And he said, but before you answer me, I want you to check with your parents if they think this would be good for you. So I talked it over with my parents. They thought it would be good, and they asked me what I thought, and I thought I'd like to work for the district. When I went back to Mr. Vanderslice, actually it was Dr. Vanderslice at the time, he said to me, that's fine, but I don't want you to tell anyone until I tell you you can tell. Well, at that time, all the seniors were going for interviews, and Miss Worth would say to me, why don't you want to go for an interview? And I would say, I didn't think I liked so-and-so to go here or there. But then after about a month, it got a little embarrassing. So I went back to Dr. Vanderslice, and I said, can I tell? And he said, yes, you can. And he did that because we had confidential records in the superintendent's office, and he wanted to make sure that I had not told anybody and that I could work in that office. And so then I was able to go back to Miss Worth and say, I have a job. She said, I knew it the whole time.
So that was a test.
That
huh?
was a test, and it was a good one. So I worked in the superintendent's office just part-time till I finished school, and then I went to work for Ed Terry in Terry School.
Edwin F. Terry.
He was one of the most fabulous educators I think I've ever met. He was so full of knowledge about education. He was wonderful. So I worked for him for 7 months. And then from there, Dr. Vanderslice called and wanted to know if I would work in the principal's office. Mr. Mutehart was principal. And then about that time, I did take that job, but about that time, Dr. Vanderslice retired, and Dr. Rice came, Cecil Rice. So I worked in the principal's office for about a year. Then I got another call, would you like to come work in the superintendent's office? And I went over there and worked there. And I was in the superintendent's office until 1954, when I left to have my first child. And the superintendent at that time was Samuel McDonald. And then I was off for 10 years, and I went back to work in 1963 when my youngest son, Peter, went to first grade. And at that time, I went back to Benner School because Mr. Smith was on sabbatical. And Mr. Zinzarella was going to take care of Benner and Gordon as principal. So I stayed there from February until July. And then in July, I went over to the new Gordon on Kersey Street. Mr. Zinzarella was principal, and I stayed there for 22 years. And I was able to buy back my 8 years that I was away, and when I retired, I had 30 years of service.
Good for you. And let's go way back then. Tell me, how did you meet your husband?
When I was working in the superintendent's office, Dorothy Bear was our office manager. And I knew my husband and his family because we all went to the same church, but I didn't know him well because he had been away. He had gone into the service in '43. And Dorothy Bear said to me, they need chaperones for the senior dance. How would you like to go? I said to her, yeah, and who am I going with? And she said, well, there's a fellow who wants to meet you. And why don't you call him and tell him that you'd like him to come with me? I said, Mrs. Bear, I'm not going to call him. In those days, girls didn't call fellas.
Right.
So she called him, and then he called me, and our first date was at the senior prom in 1948.
And it wasn't even your senior prom.
And it wasn't my senior prom. But they used to recruit people the teachers and secretaries who worked to go as chaperones. So that was our first date. And things progressed from then on. And we were married in 1950.
And having spent 30 years as an employee of the school district, I'm sure you've seen a lot of administrators come and go, and teachers, and probably a lot of changes in the way we deliver education to our students. Share with us some of your observations about changes in education over the years in Coatesville.
Well, I think when I went back to Gordon, they had team teaching at that time, which worked very well. But things were very, very structured. The kids were put in different sections, and we had a tremendous PTA. The parents were involved that way. And I don't know how else to tell you, except that it was structured. And we had the team teaching. The teachers would meet and talk with different parents if their child had a problem. And I have to say, Mr. Zinzarella ran a very tight school, but he was so organized that you could follow anything that he wanted you to do. And there was a lot more respect, I think, for the teachers. And I'm a real proponent of teachers because my son's a teacher. But because also of what I saw, the teachers would, you could see they gave their all to the children.
Ann, you have been involved for quite a number of years in various aspects of our community, and I'm referring to our situation in terms of hospitals and also Civil Service Commission and some other venues that I'm sure we'll go into in a moment. But start off, if you would, with the hospital.
All right, we've always supported our hospital, and it was Coatesville Hospital and Brandywine Hospital now. And I did volunteer work at the desk and so on whenever I had time. But then when I retired, I was on the auxiliary board and I did a lot of volunteer work, took part in their projects and so on. And I was on the board, and I became president of the auxiliary for 4 years. And during that time, one of the big things that I remember about being president, they were bringing back trauma, and that was a big, big thing at that time. So I was approached by the hospital administration and said, we're going to have a big fund drive. Do you think the auxiliary could be the lead person, lead organization really to get this going? And I will never forget that board meeting that day. I said to the girls, well, what are we going to donate? What do you think we can make in the next, and we could take 3 years to pay it off. Well, we started with 100,000, 200,000, and so we finally said we'd pledge $250,000.
Good for you.
And the fella, Dr. Rotundo, was the head of trauma at the time. And he came in, of course, gave us a pep talk and so on. And then when we told him we were going to pledge $250,000, well, they were thrilled. And I have to say, everybody worked real hard, and we paid that off in less than 3 years from our fundraisers. We have the dance and the Holly Trail, and we do a lot of different things. And thank God the trauma came back on, and we do need that.
Yes, we certainly do. Can you give me a little historical background on the transition between the Coatesville Hospital on Strode Avenue and the Brandywine Hospital? How was the need recognized, and what sort of movements did it take to make that happen?
Well, I think there was a little, more than a little discussion about moving. Because, you know, you have a faction that says we're not going to move, and then you have a faction that says we have to move. And I think it took a little bit of giving in on both sides. And then they, you know, I think they came to realize we really needed a new hospital. And as I recall, they had picked one site up in the same area where the hospital is now. But then something went wrong, and I can't even remember what that was. And then they got the land where we are now. And I think it's been proven we really made a good
decision,
transition, and a good move. And for a local hospital, I think we're doing very well. And of course, you know, we've merged with the Lancaster Alliance, which is Lancaster General Hospital, and some of the hospitals in Lancaster County. And I think it's been a good move for us. I really do. We have terrific doctors. I was in the hospital last year and firsthand noticed, got tremendous treatment from the nurses and everyone. So it's a good hospital. As you can tell, I'm really...
Oh, I can tell. You've been very involved and an intimate part of it, I'm sure. And among all of your other activities, you were also the secretary for the commission that was formed to convert the Coatesville city government from a mayoral government to a managerial government.
Yes, that's right.
I'm sure there must have been some very heated debates and discussions that you were privy to.
There were.
Tell us about some of those.
Well, we met, and they asked me if I would like to be secretary to take all the minutes and so on. And we had a nice group of men, as I recall. Bob Watterson was the chairman. Paul Gibler was another secretary of the commission, and Paul Johnson, and I can't remember them all. But we had a nice group of men.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how they started, first of all, they talked to the manager of the Pottstown area. And he came over and told us how it would work. Well, then what they did, they called in each of the councilmen. At that time, each councilman was in charge of a department, the water department, the roads, and so on. And each time we had a meeting, we would have one of them, and they would tell us how the departments were run.
Yeah.
Well, we had a lot of discussions. And I have to tell you something funny. There were some nights, I'm not kidding, where I think, oh, how am I going to write these minutes? But Bob Orr was with WCOJ at the time, and he was sitting next to me. I said to him, I'll call you tomorrow morning so we can get this straightened out. Because everybody would be talking at the time. And then there were people there, too, who they weren't that in favor of changing. So there were a lot of heavy discussions, really and truly. That lasted, I know, several months. And so then when they decided.
Well, I'd like to get into some of the points of discussion if we can.
Well,
can you give me some idea of why a need was felt to change or why there was resistance?
Well, I think the need came, if I recall, that commission felt that we needed more professional people to guide the city and to be there full-time. Because our mayors were really never full-time, they were part-time mayors.
Yes.
And then the department heads were the councilmen, and they also had jobs. They couldn't tend to their departments every day. And I think that, and they wanted to bring in somebody who was a professional, like a manager,
Mm-hmm.
and also to appoint different people at a full-time job being the roads department head and the like the water works, and they felt that it would better serve the city than rather having a lot of lay people on part-time doing these jobs. And of course there were some people who were against that. Of course, the people who were councilmen at that time, they didn't think it was a good idea for us to change. And because the city had always had a manager and had always had the councilman, and but I think the consensus of opinion was we need somebody there at City Hall every day, 8 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
We need these other people running the waterworks and so on there full-time also. And there were heated discussions. In fact, even personally, I was at a car club one night, and one of the men who was the head of a department, and he really lit into me. Why are you people doing this? Why are they doing this? We're doing fine with a mayor and so on. And that was, that was the big, big thing. I think they didn't want to let go of mayor, somebody being mayor. Well, it was a big campaign. When we were finished, of course, it was put up for a vote, and the manager system won. And I personally, it's my own personal opinion, I think it's so much better that you have somebody there full-time who makes up a budget and can tell you exactly what's going on in the city. And then the other departments, I feel, are running well.
Yes. And particularly, I would guess, to have someone whose education and background has been geared towards city administration.
Exactly. Of course, you still have people today who say, oh, we should go back to mayor. Why? That's what I'd like to know, why? But it was very, very educational for me. I learned an awful lot about the city, and the men were really handled themselves very professionally, the ones who were on the commission.
And just as a frame of reference for our viewers, the change from mayor to manager would have occurred approximately when?
I'd say early 80s.
In the early 80s?
I would think.
Mhm.
That's my best guess.
Okay. Going back over your association and your goings-on here in Coatesville, you've also been affiliated with the Coatesville Civil Service Commission as
Yes.
well. Tell us about that.
That was very interesting. I was on the Civil Service Commission, and what we did, Horace Bonsall was head of that at the time. We had meetings and so on, but then when it came time for the policemen to take their tests for sergeant or higher, we sat there, like I was like a monitor for them. And what happened, this company from Philadelphia, I can't recall the name, would come in and they would give out the tests. Every test had a number. There was no one's name on the test except that company had their
Had a
list.
list
The
of
name
names.
But when we turned the papers over to that company, it was only numbers. We had no clue who did what. And sometimes those tests would take 3 and 4 hours, and we had to be there to monitor them. And then when it came back, of course, the list came out of who made it, and some people were very unhappy. But I always felt that was a real good way of doing it, because no names were there. No one could say, oh, they favored so-and-so. And I really felt that was a very fair way of doing it. And I served on that commission, I guess, until the next, let's see, wasn't the next manager, it was the next president of the council. And then my term was up, and then they got other people to fill in.
Can you shed some light on what types of jobs were awarded to those who were successful on the test?
Well, some of them, they were going for like corporal or a sergeant. At that time, I remember twice we went for a position of sergeant. And I imagine the questions were hard. I don't know. Some, at that time, as I recall, one time we had 2 men who passed.
And one job.
Yeah, but then they were allowed to come back, like when another opening came up, they were allowed to come back and take the test again. But it was run very efficiently, I felt. Horace Bonsall did a tremendous job as the chairman of the Civil Service Commission. And Henry Aceta was on it, and I, and Horace Bonsall.
And you've also worked with the Red Cross for a number of years too, haven't you?
I did, and that's been a good while ago. I was representative for our church with the Red Cross, and we had to make sure we would get volunteers from our church to go when we had the local drive and so on. And
Tell me, what kinds of issues were you attempting to deal with as a member of the Red Cross?
well, I really didn't get involved into that part of it, Kirk. I did go to some of the meetings. Of course, they want you to get people, make sure you get people to come out. And I would give a little pep talk once in a while at our church to say, come out, they really need blood, blood and so on. And then, I'll tell you the truth, I was on for a couple of years, and then I got involved in too many things, that something had to go, and that was one of the things. But I did serve as representative for our church.
So what the Red Cross was dealing with then was strictly blood drives?
Yes.
Because when I think of Red Cross, I think of a number of
Number
rescue work and et cetera.
Right, and I think since I was on it, I mean, it's expanded tremendously. I remember when I worked for the school district, they would come in, and sign us up, and I always went. The other girl I worked with, and a lot of the teachers would go, and that was good. So I don't know how they're doing now, but I would imagine they're doing well.
But during the time of your association with the Red Cross, does that mean that there was not such things as disaster relief aid and things like that?
It probably was, but I wasn't involved in
It was
that.
just not as well known.
Right.
And you grew up in the Coatesville School District. You're a Coatesville graduate. You're a 30-year Coatesville School District employee, and your children have gone through the Coatesville schools as well. That's a lot of association with one
Yes.
particular school district. Share your impressions and observations over the years of our school district with me.
Well, first of all, when I started working, I truly loved what I did. And as I got into the school part and out of administration, I really felt that I was learning something new every day. And I have to give credit to Mr. Zinzarella in a way. Any new projects or new curriculum, he always told the secretaries what was going on. And that was tremendous. We really felt we were learning. And when my kids were going through the Coatesville schools, they had a terrific education. And in fact, the other day we were talking about some of the things that the kids would do. And one of my kids remembered they used to have the treasure hunts. Miss Christopher used to run those for the Spanish classes.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids would come to your house and so on, and yet that was educational. Everything they did pertained to what they were learning in Spanish. And that was they often talk about that. And they still feel they had tremendous teachers. They did, and we were so proud of our district. And I still am. I mean, you do hear a lot of things, but basically, I think we're doing a good job. The teachers are doing a tremendous job. And my one son went on to become a teacher, always wanted to be one, and has been teaching for 19 years. My other son was always interested in TV, so he took up communications, and he finished up at Temple, and he's working for TV Guide as an assignment editor. And he said he thinks the language, the English that he learned here, you can't beat it. He said even in college, professors would say, where did you learn this? And I remember one of the kids saying they had to take biology in college, and he had saved, this is my youngest son, all his notes from Scott and then to Cash.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the professors couldn't believe the notes that he had. So they're proponents of the school district. They brag about it, and if somebody kind of tries to put us down, they're right there.
Yeah, good
they're
for
right
them.
there. And they were involved in a lot of the activities, and they had a terrific time here. And when I say terrific, learning time,
Mm-hmm.
and fun time also.
I'm
They
sure.
really did. Hmm. So I love this district. I really do.
And it shows.
Thank you.
Ann Demaio, I can't thank you enough for being with us today and being a part of our oral history project.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your calling me for this. I enjoyed it very much.
Good. Thanks again.
You're welcome.